Hey friends, SGT here from sgtreport.com, and I have back on the line the one and only Rob Kirby from kirbyanalytics.com. Rob, thanks for joining us. Welcome back.
Nice to be here, and geez, what are we going to talk about today, Sean?
Isn't that the question? I've written down a couple of things I'd love your opinion on. We've got Ireland's Foreign Minister and current European Council President Michael Noonan proposing that accounts worth over 100,000 euros in Ireland be bailed in for future bank wind downs. This coming from Goldcore. We've got the gold and silver COT report I looked at over at Silver Doctor saying that commercials have covered a massive 15 million ounces of silver shorts, but still have 71 million ounces net short. We could talk about James Rickards and who he is, because he's been suggesting for a very long time that maybe the government should just seize all of the gold reserves being held at the New York Fed in New York and use those to revalue the dollar, which I think is a very dangerous idea. You and I have touched on that in the past. We could talk about the LIBOR crisis, which you've written about and continue to follow. Where would you like to begin?
Well, you know what, Sean? I think all these items that you just mentioned all fit neatly under an umbrella called full spectrum dominance. And it might sound like a bit of a heady term, but full spectrum dominance is, in my view, what humanity is being increasingly subject to, whether it's from the boots on the ground or the boots on the throat police state, which is being imposed on all free thinkers and formerly free humanity in the Western world, or whether you're talking about the Irish chap Noonan, who suggested that bail-ins be the way of the day in the European Union regarding future bank failures. This proposed piece of legislation, if you're not aware, that Mr. Noonan's talking about as it pertains to the European Union, is really nothing more than what's already been practiced or been implemented in Cyprus, which Canada has, in their last budget, I believe last month, included language to that effect in their latest budget. And which, who was it in the U.S. I read just earlier this morning, is proposing that this will be the way of the day in America as well. You see, because the reality regarding this bail-in legislation is something that's been mandated from the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks, and they're based in Basel, Switzerland. And this language was actually developed a little over 2 years ago by the BIS, and which has been adopted by all the member central banks of the BIS system. So what we're really living under, or what we're really subject to, is a system of I just use the term, which isn't really a new term, but full spectrum dominance, and its systems and processes are being implemented, and structures are being implemented to give the powers that be control of all aspects of our lives, whether it's where we can travel to the derivatives complex is another part of it, because the derivatives complex is nothing but a price control grid giving the money printers the ability to control prices of all strategic assets as they continue to print uncontrollably endless amounts of fiat money. And without the price control grid, which is the derivatives markets in aggregate, without these price control grids in place, the excess or the abusive monetary creation would be manifesting itself in places that the powers that be don't want it to be. Like without the derivatives complex, when you print too much money, bond yields go up and the price of metal goes up. And when bond yields go too high, and when the price of precious metal goes too high, it signals to the masses monetary distress and that the system is not in good shape. and it causes people to do things like panic and hoard and all these sorts of things. And these are things that the powers that be have been trying to prevent. So thus the derivatives complex was established. They have control over interest rates. They have control over the price of metals. They have control over the price of energy, and to a large extent they have control over the price of food. So this is the world we're living in right now. You know, Sean, it's becoming increasingly more apparent to even the most biased people who are biased in favor of the system, people who have spent their lives supporting the system. Even these people are starting to ask questions, and their explanations for the unexplainable events that are occurring in our capital markets, in our geopolitical markets. Their explanations are becoming weaker and weaker, or unbelievable and more unbelievable as time goes along.
And maybe even they're waking up to some extent, because how can you not? I posted a piece today at SGT Report from CNBC about Dow 15,000, in which in the body copy of the piece it said this is the 17th consecutive Tuesday in which the Dow has gone up, which has never, ever happened before. Clearly, the message being sent to the sheeple is that everything is fine. Because of this full-spectrum bankster dominance that you just talked about, everything is fine. They're sending exactly the message they want to send. Gold and silver are down. The Dow is up. Your paradigm is completely safe. Just stay invested with us. Stay invested in this U.S. dominance, fiat dollar, world reserve currency paradigm. You just stick with us and everything will be just fine.
Yep, but the cracks that are beginning to show more and more, Sean. You just hit on one when you said that so many Tuesdays in a row, a certain pattern has developed, and the reason these patterns start showing up and cracks start appearing in the edifice is because the statistical odds of something doing or replicating a pattern in over a course of 15, 20 times, or a ridiculous number of times, it becomes so statistically improbable that such a thing would occur that it becomes difficult to assign odds or believability that events that are happening are actually occurring naturally, occurring in nature. And what it reeks of is contrivance. And what it reeks of is a man-made event. And recently we had a similar event that occurred over a 2-day period, April 12 and April 15, Friday the 12th of April and Monday the 15th, when the price of gold was seen to take an 8.5 standard deviation crash dive over a 2-day period. And you see, statistically, there is no math to even calculate the odds of an 8.5 standard deviation movement naturally in the price of anything, because the odds of such a thing, if you extrapolate, because standard deviation, statisticians have charts on the likelihood of things occurring. And the likelihood of things occurring in statisticians' lingo is referred to as standard deviation, as in one standard deviation isn't all that rare, but a 2 standard deviation movement is a less likelihood. And what the standard deviation chart effectively expresses are Bell distributions. And anybody who knows math would know what a Bell distribution is. And anyway, the mathematics in statistical analysis goes up to 7 standard deviations. And I mean, I was speaking last week or 2 weeks ago with Jim Willey, who's got a PhD in statistics, and I was asking him about the standard, the hypothetical, the odds of an 8.5 standard deviation event, price or data movement event occurring. And Jim said to me, well, math doesn't work after 7 standard deviations because math itself breaks down because the numbers become so big. And I think it was Jimmy said to me the odds of a 7 standard deviation event were something like 1 in 480 billion.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, the math becomes so scary. But you see, what people don't understand is when you go from 7 standard deviations to 8.5 standard deviations, the progression or the movement isn't linear. It's geometric. So where the odds of a 7 standard deviation event might be calculable to like 1 in 480 billion, the odds of 8.5 standard deviation is geometrically bigger. It's not like extrapolation in a straight line. It's geometrically bigger.
That's right. Every now and then you'll include me on these email chains, and you talk with some heavy hitters out there. You've got Norsini, and as you mentioned, Jim Willey, Bill Murphy, Greg Hunter, Ed Steer, yourself, so many of you guys talking about this stuff in the evenings. Chris Powell. Yeah, I mean, it's statistically impossible what's happening, which is waking up even the most diehard establishment supporters. I mean, the 17th consecutive up day on the Dow with Dow at 15,000, it's not statistically likely, it's not statistically possible, and yet it's happened. Well, what would you like to talk about next? Would you like to talk about what's going on at the COMEX? Would you like to talk about, Jim Rickards and, who he is, and, he being maybe a mouthpiece for the establishment and his history with long-term capital management? What avenues would you like to explore here next?
Well, why don't you take it in the direction you want to go in? Because, Sean, I'm quite comfortable on any of these topics, really.
Okay, let's see here. I agree with you about full spectrum dominance, full spectrum Bankster dominance. I've not released this publicly yet, but I'll say it now. We had a visit on the site at SGT Report on May 6th when we posted a interesting exhibit called Boston Manhunt Timeline, and that was from our friends over at insanemedia.com. Well, they were tracking what was going on, incoming traffic on their site, and they picked up on a visit by U.S. Department of State, was the ISP, and that was coming out of Washington, District of Columbia. They were, trolling, or shall we say observing my website, and then they went over to insanemedia.com. I have the screen grab here, which I'll put up here in this video. And, the point is that it is full-spectrum bankster dominance. The heart of the real CIA is over at the State Department. Maybe we should explore some of the folks that are, giving us their 2 cents on the gold and silver markets and, explore who they really are.
Well, when you bring up who visits who, like I have a little website myself, and I don't even check my weblog every day, but I check it periodically, and I'll take a sampling because for people who are casual readers or casual listeners who don't operate websites and don't get involved in things like weblog data. And I mean, I'm no expert at it, but I've just learned a little bit enough about a whole bunch of things to be kind of dangerous over the years. And I do my own sampling of the traffic that's coming on my little site. And I mean, I've had a website now for about 7 or 8 years, and I think some of the things I write about tend to be a little bit controversial. But the kind of traffic that I see that shows up in my weblog over the years, excuse me, is I'm going to say if there's a constant theme, I'm going to suggest to you that the traffic on my site would tend to be very academic, because major universities around the world show up on my weblog all the time. A lot of government, whether it's the U.S. government, the Canadian government, the British government, the German government, the European Union government, the ECB, the Federal Reserve, whether it's the American military, all divisions of the American military, the U.S. State Department, the INS, the SEC, the CFTC, every alphabet agency in America, these all the Fortune 500 companies, with a particular emphasis on U.S. defense establishment companies. So these are the people, and I only say this for people in the owned lapdog mainstream press who like to label us as nutters, tinfoil hat wearers, and conspiracy theorists. For a bunch of nutters, tinfoil hat wearers, and conspiracy theorists, an awful lot of people who most people would suggest are pretty heavy hitters in world affairs, seem to care an awful lot about what we say, an awful lot about what we're reporting.
Yeah, it's open source intelligence gathering, and I would dare say that the powers that be want to know what guys like you and Jim Willey are saying, because you're the source for a lot of truth, and I'd have to believe that some of the people in those departments, some of those people are decent people, but more likely a lot of them are, they're doing the bidding of their masters, and they're doing intelligence gathering, and their job is to make sure that the truth doesn't come out. Their job is to make sure that we are viewed as conspiracy theorists and nutters, because what we are doing on a daily basis is trying to share truth with the people, because I figure the only way we can take this thing back, the only way we can save our system, our way of life in the United States, the only way that we can save what we had at one point, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is to inform our brothers and sisters so that they'll help us stand up and fight for it. And I don't mean fight for it literally. I don't want it to come to that. Of course, it looks like the DHS would like for that to happen as they stockpile 1.2 billion rounds of ammunition. But, my point is that we got to wake people up so that they can fight back, so that we can take our country back from those that want to destroy it, from the Marxists, from the communists, from the banksters. And at the end of the day, the reason that I started this website is because I thought the best way to do that was for people to have honest money. Now, that hasn't been the best avenue for folks, as the Dow has gone from 6, 7, 8,000 to 15,000, and silver's gone from 50 to 25. I feel badly about that, but, my heart was in the right place, because if this wasn't a manipulated, crummy criminal system, gold and silver would be much, much, much higher.
Hear, hear. And I mean, there's, what, Sean? There's little that really needs to be added to that. But in terms of what the price of silver's done in the last little while, and that it's been taken down from $50 down to under $25 in the paper markets. I think you'd be hard pressed to go and buy any amount of physical metal at those prices, by the way, whether it would be in coins or small bars. But the only thing I would suggest to people who are maybe a little despondent or a little lighter in the wallet because of what's occurred, if I go to a swimming pool and I take a beach ball, I can force the beach ball down to the bottom of the pool. But unless I'm willing to either invest in some breathing apparatus to breathe underwater, or anchor the beach ball to the bottom of the pool with some artificial piece of gear, the beach ball doesn't naturally stay on the bottom of the pool, because the minute the pressure is let off the beach ball, it's going to surface and it's going to pop. And realistically, I would suggest to anybody who wants to pay attention that driving the price of silver down to the levels it is a very unnatural place for the price of silver to be, given the backdrop of monetary abuse and reckless money printing that's occurring the world over. And also to anybody who wants to flippantly say, well, silver isn't money, I'm going to just say, I'm sorry, go read your history books. Silver is money. It's mandated as money in the U.S. Constitution, and it has served as money for thousands of years. And silver will serve as money for a lot longer than the U.S. dollar will serve as the world's reserve currency. And you know what? You can just make a mental note of that and remind me when I'm right. And silver is money. Gold is money. The two monetary metals that have had the most insulting, reckless, abusive attacks. And you know what? At the end of the day, they still never go to zero. And no matter how hard these people try, they still can't discredit them to the point where nobody wants to own them. I got another little thing I just want to tell you. And this is a story that dates back to about 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I was out golfing with my brother. And we went to a golf course that had been built, and this was in suburban Toronto. And we went to a golf course that had been built largely with Swiss money. And we got matched up on our round of golf. We got matched up with a former chairman of a Swiss bank in Canada. And as the round progressed, we were standing on the tee. I think it was the fifth or the sixth hole. And we started talking about the economy. And this retired chairman of a Swiss bank in Canada asked my brother and I what we thought about the markets in terms of the financial markets. And we explained to him how we really liked, the two of us explained to him how we really liked gold as an asset. And we thought gold had a very bright future. And at this point, you have to understand, this was 10 years ago, and I think the price of gold was around $400 at the time. And we sort of expressed a very, very, very upbeat and positive outlook for the price of gold on a go-forward basis. And this former chairman, retired chairman of a Swiss bank, looked at the two of us, and he said to us, "Do you have any idea? Do you have any conception of the orchestrated campaign that there has been against gold? And if you had any idea of the orchestrated campaign that there has been against gold the world over the years, you would not have nearly such a bright outlook as you do today." And you see people, and you see Jeffrey Christian, and you see Dennis Gartman, and you see John Nadler. That really happened. And it doesn't really matter how long you imbeciles parade around saying that these things don't occur. These things have occurred, and that really happened. And I can stick my flag in the ground and say it did happen. And I even know the name of the man who told me that. But you know what? I don't need to put his name out there and to cause him difficulty. I know the story. And you know what? An increasingly large number of people around the world are getting it. And little trolls like Jeffrey Christian and trolls like Dennis Gartman, it doesn't really matter how much they troll around and they spread their deceit and their lies, because the whole world's getting it, and we're getting it in spades. And this is why when you go to your local coin shop and when you want to buy any retail amount of physical precious metal, there isn't any. Because central planning the world over has created the same outcome no matter where it's practiced. We know in the Soviet Union when they fixed the price of foodstuffs, like simple things, but staples, like food, bread, meat, and when they fixed the price at a place where it didn't make sense to produce them, you ended up with empty shelves and hungry tummies. And you know what? We're starting to see that in spades with the metals. When you drive the prices of metals down to a point where it doesn't make sense to extract them, then they disappear. Central planning is a recipe for failure, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who lies about it. It doesn't matter who preaches for it. It's a model of failure. It has always been a model of failure, and we have too many working examples of it.
Well, I absolutely 100% agree with you. Jeffrey Christian, John Nadler, Gartman. I completely agree with what you're saying, because those of us who can see the truth, those of us who have, seen the matrix, once you've seen the matrix, you can't unsee it. And the same thing goes for false flag terrorism, which we've talked about in the past. I've talked about with many other guests. We know what happened with the Gulf of Tonkin. Okay, we know what happened with was it the USS Liberty? I think it was the USS Liberty. Isn't that the boat Israel shot up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So we know what happened with the USS Liberty. We know what happened on 9/11. Not the full story. We just know the official story is poppycock. So once you've seen the matrix, you can't unsee it. And the good news is, if there's any, is that more and more people in this world are seeing the matrix for what it is. So my question is, at what point does the matrix under which we live in this country collapse? At what point do the controllers lose control? At what point does silver and gold break free from the manipulation? How does that happen? Is it a COMEX default? I don't think that's enough. It probably will never default. They'll just settle in paper endlessly. So what is the end game? Is it the end of the dollar as the world's reserve currency? Because it seems like there will never be that magic break day.
Well, you know what, Sean? I believe that the collapse is unfolding in front of us now. And I mean, maybe in time we will be able to look back and say this was just early stages of a collapse. But I mean, think about the things that we've seen in the last couple of months. In the last couple of months, we've had a major Dutch bank, ABN AMRO, default on their obligations to clients who they in good faith sold gold to, allocated gold to. And they announced quite abruptly, I believe it was just about a month ago, that they weren't going to honor their commitments of sales of gold, and they said they were going to settle people in cash. So, I mean, there's one example of somebody who's welched on their bets of promises of gold already. And I mean, ABN AMRO is a very, very, very big bank in Europe. And and I know at one point in time anyway, whether they are now or not, I don't know, but I know at one time they were considered a prime bank. What else has occurred?
Cyprus. I mean,
Cyprus with the bail-ins, and lo and behold, we now have learned that this is a model which has been adopted basically by central banks the world over. So, this Cyprus, or what occurred in Cyprus is a model for what will be implemented the world over as banks run into problems. Banks are going to run into problems because banks are the purveyors of fiat currency, and fiat currency, by its very design, is guaranteed to fail.
It's hard to believe when you're sitting in this paradigm. I'm looking out of a beautiful window in my office today at my day job here at my lunch break as I talk with you, the one and only Rob Kirby from Kirby Analytics, and it's a beautiful day. The sky's blue. I see the world in color. It's funny how we look back at history. We look back at the Nazis. We look back at Stalin. We look back at all those horror stories throughout world history, Genghis Khan, and we remember those things in black and white. We remember those horror stories in human history from the pictures we've seen or the film strips we've seen, which were generally black and white. And today we're living through similar horror stories, unconstitutional wars of aggression, which have killed millions of people, which our government is responsible for. The complete lack of rule of law in our own financial markets and on Wall Street. Nobody goes to jail. Nobody goes to prison. Nothing ever changes. Benghazi. We see Fast and Furious with Eric Holder, running guns down to Mexico, and the sky's blue. Everything seems fine. I've often said, Rob, if you are fully employed in this country, I know you're in Canada, but if you're fully employed in the United States, living under this government that's responsible for so many horrors, as long as the sky's blue and you have a job and you can put food on the table, everything seems just fine.
Well, you know what? What you're saying, Sean, is so true, and it's so accurate. The people who have the means to still put a meal on the table, or who have the ability to get by, most of them that I come into contact with still don't want to hear about anything that's going to disturb that moment of contentment, Jane and Joe six-pack and the like. And as long as, for the most part, for a lot of people anyway, as long as they can come home at night and they can sit down at dinner and they can have their pizza and they can have a few beers after dinner and get lost watching a football game or the hoops or the basketball or whatever, they don't really want to hear anything that's gonna interfere with that, or it's going to threaten the last vestiges of what they perceive to be comfort and their own little freedom. They don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And with that being said, there's still a growing body of people who are awakening and who are getting turned on to how corrupt and crooked everything is in our capital markets. And so we've got the two polar opposites sort of battling and duking it out with each other in terms of which way the pendulum is gonna swing next. And boy, we're certainly living in unprecedented times. And Sean, you brought it up, but isn't it incredible how some people can see the glass half full and some people see it half empty? Some people can see the abuse, and some people see nothing but blue sky. And, maybe it is a point or a question of it's not all good and it's not all bad, but in my view, what I see, I know that our current predicament or our current operandus, the way we're carrying on today, isn't sustainable, and that's what bothers me the most. So, for people who think it's nothing but blue sky, I'm sorry, I don't think that's sustainable, into the long term. Like for anybody who has kids, the way you've grown up isn't going to be the way your kids get to live their lives, because what's been created, and unfortunately in our names, what's been created is not sustainable. And this is why it's so important to get information out and to educate people as to what has occurred, because what has occurred will profoundly influence the future. Because what has occurred is not sustainable, or what's being done currently isn't sustainable into the future. And, that's what my work and what my research has told me, and that's why I care. Because I care an awful lot about what my legacy is. I don't want future generations to say he understood and didn't do anything.
Right.
Because that, to me, it's not an acceptable outcome.
No, I totally agree. You weren't narcissistic. You didn't, blind your eyes to what was going on. You didn't turn your back on your progeny. You didn't turn your back on future generations. And I think that's what we're all trying to do, whether it's Ron Paul or Lou Rockwell, whether it's Jim Willey, whether it's Rob Kirby. And I sure do appreciate you and appreciate your voice, Rob.
Well, you know what, Sean? Hopefully we lend our voices to a noble cause. And hopefully, we in our own way, we make a little difference and make the world a slightly more informed place, if not a better place.
Damn straight. Like a ripple in a pond, it'll reach the other side. Rob, can you tell people how they can subscribe to your services? I mean, you're kind of operating at a PhD level, so it's probably even over my head, but why don't you tell people how they can find you on the Internet, and if they want to subscribe, how they go about doing that?
Yeah, I'm on the web at kirbyanalytics.com, and my site's pretty simple, and what I do is pretty straightforward, and you can find me at kirbyanalytics.com.
Okay, Rob. Well, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it very, very much. And guys, please check out Rob's site at kirbyanalytics.com. Rob Kirby, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Be good.
See you, Rob. Bye.